I scored 92.5% in my ICSE board exams in 2022, and these are my personal tips that you can use to score more than 90% in your 10th board exams without having to go to tuitions. The first thing about getting those marks is actually about creating routines. I don't believe that you should do any amount of studying without actually having a routine for it first, because it's basically like you can still get those marks without it, but it's not the smart approach, because it's like running faster randomly without actually being certain that the path you are taking is the shortest. And how do you actually create a routine? By watching the rest of the video. I will share my personal routine that I used to follow back in 2022. The second thing that you need to do is attempt PYQs. It's not a good idea to just go and attempt the paper without actually having an experience of the previous year question papers, because they are like this reference to the actual paper. So when you actually sit in the exam hall, you won't be like completely shocked to see the question paper and like start sweating like crazy like this. Now about attempting them, you can like easily find those 10 standard PYQs online. You just need to search 10 standard PYQs with like your board name and you will find them. Now obviously go for the ones that have like the solutions and the questions separately, because or else it's just a dumbass move to attempt a paper which has the solutions and questions together, and the while attempting the paper like the answers are straight in front of you. Now back when I prepared for the exams, I use my laptop for like attempting the PYQs. But if you really think that you'll just get distracted like that after 5 minutes, then it's a better idea that you should just take a printout of those PYQs and then start attempting them. And particularly when you are trying to attempt them, you should like do it like the actual exam. You shouldn't just try to solve this PYQ in like for hours at end. You need to actually make it like the actual exam scenario. So you need to have like a slot for this, particularly in your routine. And in this slot, you will just sit and attempt the paper. Like you can obviously drink water, and I would say like you can use the washroom. It's okay, but still ideally it's just better to go before attempting the paper. So like in this time slot, it should be just like you set a timer and you get the paper completed in that particular time only, because this will actually give like an exam like experience. So when you actually sit to attempt the actual exam, it won't be like a new thing for you to do. It would be ideal to set one day for one subject only, because the PYQs will be long. It will be around 2 to 4 hours in duration. So one subject for one day. And if you already have like your board timetable with you, then what you can do is just exactly copy like the board timetable and like have these subjects in that order and attempt them in that particular order. But if you, let's say you don't have the board timetable right now, then you can have like this random order, but it's not a good idea to like waste a lot of time coming up with like this perfect order for yourself. Don't do that. After you have attempted the PYQ, the most important thing is do not take a break. No matter how tired you might feel, do not take a break. Just go on to checking the solutions immediately, because it's like this focus tactic. Because if you take like a break and then you check the solutions later on in the day, it will just be like it creates like a disconnection between like the paper solving time and the solution checking time. So you won't actually, it's not, your brain won't do a good job at remembering the particular mistakes that you made in the paper. So just after attempting the PYQ, directly check the solutions, and then after that you can take the break. And when you are done with attempting the PYQ and checking the solutions, then you can take a break of about 1 or 2 hours. After you are done with the PYQs, the last thing that you need to do is read the textbooks. This is basically just mugging up. You can call it as revising, but it's basically you're just mugging up. Okay. And every teacher will just tell you that don't mug up, understand the concepts, but it's basically just lies. Okay. You want to score good marks, you want to have that 90% plus, you have to mug up to a certain extent. You know what? Every Indian teacher would just say, Beta, ratta mat maro, samajhne ki koshish karo. But it doesn't work like that. The system wasn't designed in a way that you would get those good marks without mugging up to a certain extent. Well, let's talk about science. What would you actually do? You would remember the formulas, the theories, and the concepts, and you would apply them in the exam to get the marks, right? Now, you did apply those concepts to a certain extent, but then you did remember those things, right? It's not that you would sit in the exam hall, look at the paper, and actually derive the equations from scratch, derive the formulas and like think about and come up with the theories by yourself in the exam. You won't. You will remember them. Talk about social science. What are you gonna do? You're gonna remember the names of the kings, of the queens. You're gonna remember the dates. You're gonna remember the events in history. You won't actually sit in the exam hall and be like, oh, this king was egotistical, right? And so he must have acted in this particular situation in this way. You would just remember what that event was. You won't actually try to derive how that king would have actually acted in that case. Let's talk about geography. What you would do is you would just remember the vegetation, the climate, and etc., like the places of occurrence, things like that. You won't actually sit in the exam hall and be like, oh, this place is located at this degree of the globe, so therefore it must have like this kind of a climate, and therefore it must have this kind of a vegetation, and therefore it will have these kinds of fruits available. And let's talk about languages. You won't actually, what you would do is like you would just remember the morals, you would remember the stories, you would read them, you would remember the word meanings, you will remember like what you can interpret from those things, and like the figure of speech of the poems and the name of the authors and the poets, and you will just like write that in the exam. You won't actually sit in the exam hall and try to understand that extract to a deeper level to actually answer the questions. You would always be prepared with it already. So this, you need to actually first remove this concept from your brain that mugging up is not good. Mugging up is basically what you need to do in order to score good marks. That's how the system works. Although I do agree that you can use this kind of a logic to attempt like some of the questions, like let's say 10%, 20%, right, that you don't actually remember the answers to or the methods of solving to, right? You can use these kind of techniques in those kind of questions, but if you actually want that 90% plus, you would actually have to remember the answers or the methods of solving to 90% of the questions to get those marks. But for the 10%, you can do that, since like there won't be like negative marking, so you can like try to attempt it with like those kind of techniques. If it works, you get the marks, that then that's good. If you don't get it, then fine, you anyways didn't actually remember the answer to those questions. Now for maths, yeah, you can say it's like not really a good point. You can say it would be a better thing to not read the textbook and like the notes. You would just try to like solve the questions from the textbook, right? That's also okay. If you want to do that, go ahead. But personally, what I did was like I didn't actually solve a lot of sums. I did solve them, like homework sums. I did attempt them, but like I didn't actually go on to solve like the entire questions in the textbook. I just remember the formulas. I remember the methods of solving the sums, and I still scored like 92 out of 100 in maths. So that's just your personal way how you want to do it. Even for this point, I would say that study only one subject on one day. So what you can do is you already have the timetable for your PYQs. So study the subject that you are going to attempt the PYQ of on the next day, and just have it like that in that order. Now for the timings, after the PYQs, you take a break of 1 or 2 hours, then you study for 2 hours, then take a break of 30 minutes, then study for 2 hours, then take a break of 30 minutes, and then 2 hours. And 2 or 3 slots like that are just enough. Now let's say if a subject is short on content, it doesn't have like a lot to study, then what you can do is like study twice or thrice in a single day. That's what I personally did, because I just wanted to study one subject in one day. But let's say you want to have like a different approach, then you can study a different subject if you are short on content for one subject. That is mostly it. You just need 8 to 10 hours of complete focus to score more than 90% in your exams. Now if you want like better than 95%, then obviously then you can go for 12 hours. But after that, I think there's no actual point in increasing the hours. After that, it will just matter more how efficient those hours are. And I didn't actually talk about your school classes in this video. So most of what I followed, like this routine, was like after the syllabus actually got over and we didn't have like classes, so I was just following this routine entirely. But if let's say you have your school classes and your syllabus isn't over, but you still want to follow this routine, then you can. But then you will have to schedule things accordingly, because if you have classes for like 6 hours and then you on top of that you want to follow this entire routine, it would be like 16 hours of work in a day, which is very demanding. So I would say that you will have to like change the entire routine according to you if you still have like school classes and you still want to follow the routine. But I would still like advise that just let the syllabus entirely get over and then like start focusing on preparing for the board exams. And even if you follow this routine, you're just studying for 8 to 10 hours in a day, you still have like 6 to 8 hours of break and also 8 hours for your sleep so that you can maintain good physical and mental health. Now, I won't talk about self improvement and how you can improve the rest of your day in this video. So, this is the routine that I followed for my board exams, but this is not actually an exact one because it was almost 2 years back, so I don't even remember exactly what it looked like. But this is almost what it was. And you can like follow this routine exactly as it is, so it will give you a lot of benefits. But I won't actually talk about why I schedule particular things at particular times of the day, though like they have reasons behind it, but I'm not going to talk about them in this video. That is it for today's video. Thanks for watching.